The buzz about Jimmy Butler being traded continues to grow, but is there a realistic trade to be made? We'll show you why Jimmy might not be going anywhere on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. And today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We have a little bit of a different show for you today. We're going to be building some Jimmy Butler trades through the trade machine. So for those watching on YouTube, we're going to have the trade machine pulled up on the screen, and you can kind of watch us build this piece by piece. We'll be hitting the teams that Jimmy is reportedly open to getting traded to. We're also going to get into some other ideas and teams that should be calling the Heat with some different kinds of packages. So the idea here is not only how to have fun building fake trades, which everybody always has fun doing that, but also to just try to show exactly how difficult something like this could be to pull off, especially in the middle of a season here, David. So let's just jump right in with the team that makes the least amount of sense, but the one that has been sort of in the most polarizing part of the reporting around this, and that's the Phoenix Suns. So again, pulling up the trade machine here on the screen, here's basically what Phoenix can do. It's Jimmy Butler for Bradley Beal. So really quick explainer here on how this is all going to work. The Suns are over the second apron, and they're like almost $30 million over it. So it's really hard for them to get under that second apron. And then when they're over that second apron, they cannot take back more money than they're sending out, and they can't aggregate salaries. So if you're a Suns fan and you're like, oh, well, let's just try to put Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, like let's put all these guys in the trade, and then maybe we could build up to a salary for Jimmy Butler. You can't really do that, because you can only trade one of your players for one other player. So that means, and because you can't take more money back, it's only one of Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, or Devin Booker. And that's the trade. That's it. It's one of those three guys for Jimmy Butler straight up. Obviously, they're not going to be trading Kevin Durant or Devin Booker for Jimmy Butler. That doesn't make any sense. They're core parts of what they're doing. So the only logical one there is Bradley Beal. And David, we can get into it. I don't know how much time you really want to spend on this, because it doesn't make any sense for Miami to do this. Bradley Beal, has the no trade clause that he would have to waive. I know that Miami was his preferred destination before he got traded to Phoenix a couple of years ago, but it's different going to Miami to play with Jimmy Butler versus going to Miami to play in place of Jimmy Butler. And Bradley Beal might say, you know what, I'm good. I'm just going to stay in Phoenix where I could play with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. This sounds fine to me. But also, if you're the Heat, I don't know why you would do this, because Bradley Beal is not the player he was a few years ago. He's not as good as Jimmy Butler, certainly. And he's getting paid more money for more years. If you're the Heat, and I guess this is where I'll throw it to you, David, would you rather do this or just have Jimmy Butler walk away for nothing? And I understand that those aren't the two only options here, but I'm just going to propose it in that way. Jimmy Butler just walks away for nothing, or getting Bradley Beal back for him. I would argue that it's better just letting him walk away for nothing than taking Beal on this contract.
Yeah, I agree on that. I don't think it's worth the acquisition of Beal. It makes sense on no level. For Beal's perspective, as you said, with the no trade clause, he can veto any possibility of being traded to Miami. And why would he? I mean, he gets to, in theory, compete for a championship with Phoenix. Coming to Miami, not so much. There's no chance that this actually happens. So, I mean, it's a interesting deal. I like the orange hair twist and everything else. And we've talked about Beal as an option before, but realistically, Jimmy Butler is not going to be a member of the Phoenix Suns unless he joins them this summer for a veteran minimum, because that's all they can really afford.
Yeah, I mean, Bradley Beal's 31 years old. I would rather at that point just extend Jimmy Butler too. I mean, every other option other than trading for Bradley Beal just makes the most sense. So I'm glad we just were able to knock off the Suns and show that doesn't make any sense. And you agree with me too. They're not trading Durant or Devin Booker for Jimmy Butler. That doesn't
certainly not Devin Booker. Right. I mean, certainly not Booker. If Durant has asked out for some reason, then maybe. But we've heard no rumblings about that. That's not real. Again, that's not an option either. I don't think there's any, as much as KD might want to play with Bam, I don't think he wants to play with Bam so much that he's willing to just get traded. I mean, unless he's privately said something to Suns ownership, which we have not heard of.
All right, so let's move on to the Dallas Mavericks here then. The other team that Jimmy Butler is, again, reportedly open to being traded to here. This one's a little bit, it makes a little bit more sense, but you'll see why maybe it doesn't make a ton of sense here either. So obviously, Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, their salaries are less than Jimmy Butler's, so they could get moved, but they're not going to do that. So even if the math works, obviously Dallas isn't trading Luka. They're not trading Kyrie. Those guys are core parts of what it is that the Mavericks are doing. But then they've got like these other chunkier salaries over here that they can kind of get involved. Maxi Kleber already out there in terms of trade rumors. Maybe Dallas is going to try to move off of him. Let's throw him into the deal. Daniel Gafford at $13.3 million. Derek Lively is their long-term answer at center. We'll put him in the deal. And then you'll probably have to get one of Klay Thompson or PJ Washington here, David. And if I'm Dallas, I'm probably wanting to put Klay Thompson in the deal over PJ Washington, but if I'm Miami, I'm probably asking for PJ Washington over a 34-year-old Klay Thompson. Are you with me here?
No, absolutely. I just don't see any. Again, from Dallas's perspective, they want to compete, and keeping PJ Washington helps them compete much higher.
So let's make it Klay Thompson here, and then let's throw in Quentin Grimes, and we could try the trade here, and that basically works money-wise, and then Dallas, they have a 2025 first-round pick that they could throw in this deal as a sweetener, potentially. If you're the Heat, you would have to maybe reroute Klay Thompson at 34 years old to another team that could use his shooting and his spacing.
Golden State.
Yeah, they could use him. Gafford, Kleber, Grimes. I like all three of those guys, and I actually think that they would fit in Miami. But like, you're not getting that blue chip prospect back. And I think that if you're in the business of trading a superstar player in the NBA, you better get a lottery ticket back. In other words, you better get a chance to acquire your next superstar back with that deal. This deal does not get it done for Miami, right? Like, I think of like the perfect example is when the Thunder traded Paul George to the Clippers and then got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander back. Now, you don't always end up getting a guy who turns into an MVP candidate, but you got to get a guy who has at least a chance to do that. And Gafford, Kleber, Grimes, none of these guys have a chance to do that. So I would say that this doesn't make any sense for Miami. And by the way, it might not make that much sense for Dallas because this is half of their rotation.
The counter to that, though, is Paul George at that point in time a far better player than Jimmy is now.
That's fair.
You can make that argument. So I don't know that he's seen as having that kind of value. I think Miami's perspective would want to get the quote-unquote blue chip prospects that you mentioned. I just don't think that's also realistic. I mean, we might be looking at not quite pennies on the dollar, but certainly not the same value might be in terms of how you view Jimmy and his productivity and everything he's been able to accomplish over his incredible career. But I don't know that you're going to get what might be typical of that kind of a player. Certainly not at this stage in his career, and given the contract situation that every team is going to be facing this summer.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Maybe you're not getting a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who went to the playoffs as a rookie, was highly thought of after that rookie season, but you've got to get something back if you're Miami. And even like that Dallas 2025 pick, like nobody thinks that's going to be in the 20s somewhere. Like the Mavericks are awesome.
The reason why that trade, sorry to cut you off there, it just doesn't work is again, if Miami's looking at it as we're going to trade a star player for some complementary pieces, because again, I don't think the blue chipper is out there, then those in particular just don't seem to be good fits. Like Klay, he's not going to play alongside Tyler as a starter. I mean, would he supplant Duncan Robinson in the starting lineup? Is he significantly better than Duncan Robinson at this stage of his career?
I don't think that he's better at all. Yeah.
So Gafford, as a backup center?
Yeah,
Kleber as a 4-5, like he's your stretch guy. You know, I mean,
Kleber could start at the 4, but like again, like Grimes is a nice little bench
throw in
piece.
Throw PJ Washington, and that's kind of shifting there because now you could say, Klay will come off the bench perhaps, and maybe he wouldn't want that role necessarily, or as you said, perhaps reroute him. But if you get PJ Washington, it basically is a Jimmy Butler for PJ Washington trade because Washington would start immediately for Miami, but you also shore up a lot of the weaknesses of the roster: backup center, backup shooting guard, etc. So in that sense, if you can somehow figure out a way to get Washington in the deal, it's not bad.
I texted that deal. Me and Locked On Mavericks host Nick Angstadt, we were kind of exchanging text messages about this, and he was like, "This would make the Mavericks the Phoenix Suns from last year, which was not good. Just a insanely top-heavy team with absolutely no depth, though." So, I don't think the Mavericks thing makes a whole lot of sense at all. hometown state, Texas, for Jimmy Butler. There's another team there, Houston, that I don't know, that deal looks a little bit cleaner. And plus, there's another team out there in the Western Conference that might be the most motivated to trade for Jimmy Butler. We'll tell you which of those teams is most likely as a Jimmy Butler destination after this here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Their new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for live events even easier than ever before. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Look, sometimes you just get an impulse buy. You want to buy those tickets. You don't want to get frustrated waiting in a queue or having to deal with any of that. No. You want the best price right away, and you know you're going to get it through Game Time. Their all-in pricing feature shows you the total right up front, so there's no surprise fees at checkout, and you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you're going to be sitting. It's so convenient, and it takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets, because that's what Game Time does. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply, but create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Because it's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. It was one of the best features. I love the subscription tracker. It's used to cancel services you weren't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for the future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team has a free daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter, one stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shearer, and Locked On fantasy basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Seriously, those fantasy basketball tips, like that's all you really need if you're playing fantasy basketball. So sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. David, I saw the numbers today. We're like in the top 10 in terms of subscribers, but we're still behind the Boston Celtics, which does not make me happy. Good. So go ahead, sign up, lockedondaily.com. We got to beat the Celtics, as always.
Half their readership can't even read, so I don't understand what the point is.
They like the pictures, I think.
They're just signed up. It's like, oh, I know it's something they have to do with Corrals.
They just they like getting mail, you know. They just like the fun of that. Oh, somebody cares about special. Me. Yeah. All right. So the other two destinations that Jimmy Butler is reportedly at least interested in playing for if he is traded from Miami, the Houston Rockets and the Golden State Warriors. Let's start with the Houston Rockets. We're going to pull up the trade machine again here. Let's start with the Warriors rather. This one, it seems straightforward at first, David, and then you kind of start thinking about it, and you're like, I don't know. So we'll build the straightforward version first, and then I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. So Jimmy, obviously, to Golden State. You got to throw Andrew Wiggins' contract into the mix. Dennis Schroeder, who was traded for DeAnthony Melton over the weekend, he can be traded in 60 days after that trade. Nice. So because of the timing of the deal, he'll actually be trade eligible in a couple of months here before the trade deadline. So we're going to throw him in the trade, even though this is going to tell us that he can't get traded right now because it's obviously not 60 days from now. But just work with me on that. And then I think the centerpiece of that deal would be Kuminga, right? Like Golden State is out here showcasing Kuminga as part of the starting lineup. He's their most valuable young player or trade asset. They also have their own first-round picks for the next several years. Maybe they throw in a 2025 first, something like that. But this would basically be the deal here. And then you can even throw in like a Guy Santos here, whose contract is fully non-guaranteed. So Miami could just waive that outright and then stay within the roster limitations that they have. So you could try this trade again. It says failed because Dennis Schroeder can't be traded within a couple of months, but that's the only reason why it failed. Otherwise, the money works here. So the other part of this too is that the Warriors could get a third, or the Heat and Warriors could get a third team involved with some cap space just to make it easy. Let's call it the Pistons. Let's take Santos out of the trade. Let's put a bigger contract like Gary Payton in there. So what I didn't say there was the Warriors in this deal would be trading away 4 different players before getting the Pistons involved. That would leave them with 12 players under contract. They would still have to sign 2 more players. That would put them over the second apron. So they're not going to do that. So you almost have to get a third team involved. Let's, again, call it the Pistons because they have cap space. Have them take a big chunk of salary. And then all of a sudden, that's going to open up a little bit more cap space for the Warriors, $7 million. They can sign a couple of guys to the minimum. The Pistons can also send some smaller salaries back, like a Paul Reed or something else. And then the Warriors can fill out their roster. But that would basically be the deal here. What do you think about this before I tell you what my problem is with it?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of this deal. I mean, Kuminga, a nice piece for the future, I suppose, if you can re-sign him. And I think that's my biggest holdup is that, again, that's not a guarantee.
Yep.
Okay. Other than that, I mean, Andrew Wiggins, what is that chunky salary there we're talking about? I can't see the numbers.
$26 million to $30 million over the next 3 years.
Yeah, that's a lot of money that you're going to be paying a player like him. And I mean, I didn't realize he's almost 30 already. So, I mean, he's on the wrong side of his career for now. And who knows what you're going to be getting out of him in terms of production. This will be his 4th team. So, it's a lot to deal with there. I don't know. I'm not sure.
So the Kuminga part to me is the interesting part. So it really does depend on what the Miami Heat think of Jonathan Kuminga, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think his ceiling is as a player? I was asked this the other day, kind of on the spot. I won't tell you who I said, but I'm curious. Like, what if you were to make like a player comp ish?
Oh, I don't know. I can't think of any player comp off the top of my head, but I mean, I can't see all-star in his future. Do you?
I went Pascal Siakam as his absolute ceiling. Like maybe he's a number 2 scorer, a physical guy, not exactly ever going to be a floor spacer, can make some stuff happen, defensively a little versatile. But then I was wondering, I'm like,
seems a little high.
A really good player. Like that's a guy who's made an All-NBA team. Maybe that's his ceiling, right? Like we're talking about ceiling here. So like what's possible, and he's only 22 years old. And Kuminga has a lot of fans across the NBA who I think people would say, yeah, Siakam, that totally makes sense. I'm like you, I'm a little bit lower on Kuminga than some of his most ardent fans, but like is he Julius Randle? Just a guy who he can get you a bucket, but doesn't really fit within the context of a lot of different teams, very specific kind of guy, productive, but not necessarily impactful to winning. Like, I don't know. I'm having a hard time with Kuminga. And then the problem with this, David, is that Miami would only have a couple of months to evaluate him and decide for themselves what they think of Jonathan Kuminga, because this is a guy who's a restricted free agent. His agent has already been out there saying that they want the max and that they expect the max. There's a reason why the Warriors haven't re-signed him. That to me is like, there's a saying in college football, in college sports, don't recruit your problems. Yeah. And I'm not calling Jonathan Kuminga a problem, but his contract situation definitely is a problem. And I don't know that if you're Miami, you're trading away one contract situation in Jimmy Butler, but at least it's a known quantity for a more of an unknown in Kuminga, although he is that lottery pick that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I think if any deal involving Kuminga from Miami side, they would have had to have scouted him so completely, like almost like a draft pick, and understanding that he was going to be a part of their long-term future, almost like a given that he's going to be re-signing with the team. Like, I mean, they've done mid-season trades before. Like they did in 1996, was it? They acquired Tim Hardaway after his knees had started to get bulky, and they swung for the fences and acquired him, and they re-signed him that summer anyways, despite the fact that he was getting older in his career. They did the same thing with Alonzo Mourning, albeit at the start of the season, not in the middle of it. So I think if they're acquiring Kuminga, it's with the understanding we've seen enough of him and we trust that he's going to be a star, or at least a very, 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 very good player in the future. And that being the case, I think they're acquire him with the likelihood of re-signing him this time.
I mean, you would have to, wouldn't you?
No doubt.
And that part's scary because the other part is he's a restricted free agent. I don't think he's done anything in his career to show that he's a max guy. Like, I look at that Jalen Green contract that they signed with Houston, and that to me seems more realistic. The other part, the Heat didn't have a pick in that 2021 draft. So they weren't scouting guys in that first round. Definitely not the top 10, top 5-ish guys like Kuminga was. So I don't know what their exposure is to Kuminga. Like, I don't know what kind of background notes they have somewhere in Adam Simon's office, like probably
they would have
nothing.
done something.
Well, I mean, maybe a little bit, just speculative,
Yeah.
but obviously they've got scouting on him since the point is he's a restricted free agent. You can go outside and match any offer, and you can just let it say, and you could say, look, we don't think you're the max player, but go find a max contract. And when that's not out there, because it probably won't be, unless Brooklyn signs him to some crazy deal
why wouldn't they? Yeah, just to mess up with an Eastern Conference. This Washington, I imagine, has cap space too. They could probably sign him to a conference sheet, knowing that they're kind of putting Miami between a rock and a hard place in terms of a divisional rival. Yeah,
they could always do it too. So could you find a third team then, or another team to take Kuminga? So I spent a long time in prepping for this show, David, be like, what's the team that just wants to trade for Jonathan Kuminga at this stage with, a year before he goes into restricted free agency? And I had a hard time finding a team that also had something worthwhile giving back to Miami. But could you do like Kuminga with this Schroeder contract? You're about $20 million and you move that to Chicago for Lonzo Ball? Like, I don't know. That doesn't really do it for Miami. I'm getting rid of Jimmy Butler for Andrew Wiggins and Lonzo Ball. Like, pass, Like, so this stuff doesn't really work for me. And so I think the Warriors might be really motivated to get Jimmy Butler, but unless they're willing to throw in the whole kitchen sink, Kuminga, Podziemski, the picks, all of that stuff, this deal just doesn't quite get me there. I don't know.
No, I agree. I just, this is why it's so difficult. Like, I mean, it's hard to know exactly how Jimmy's value is perceived around the league, but I think internally from Miami's side, they value him fairly highly and know that it's almost worth it for them to just kind of keep him on the roster and hope for a playoff push. Like, that might be unrealistic and might not be what a lot of fans want, or at least some very vocal fans want. I just don't know how they can afford to trade him away just for something, and something that might not pan out in terms of being any kind of like real value.
There's a team out there that could put a really clean and really interesting deal together for Jimmy Butler. I'll tell you what it is after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you want to check out the latest stats, or maybe you want to view live play-by-play. Well, you can do that and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. All you've got to do is visit FanDuel.com and join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode is also brought to you by Bilt Rewards. Today's, if you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Bilt, you can now earn points on rent payments just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. You earn valuable Bilt points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. You can redeem points for flights, hotel stays, even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program, the possibilities are endless. Access unique experiences that are exclusive to Bilt members. And I love using points for travel. Bilt makes it so easy to turn rent into rewards. And if you're already paying rent, why not make it work for you? So start earning points on rent you've already been paying by going to joinbilt.com/LockedOnBA. That's joinbilt, BILT.com/LockedOnBA. Make sure to use our link so they know we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Continuing along with our Jimmy Butler trade machine experiment here. And it goes without saying, by the way, and we've said it a million times, but like the Heat, they've won 4 of their last 5. Jimmy Butler's playing great, just had a triple-double in Detroit the other night. This is not a situation where the Heat are actively shopping Jimmy Butler, but if these teams are calling and the Miami Heat are listening, which has been the reporting around this, then these are some of the packages that I would imagine, just based on doing some of the trade machine work here, that could be coming across their desk. So the next one here is the Houston Rockets, which is the other team that Jimmy Butler had been reportedly open to playing for. This team is a lot more interesting to me, David, and we're going to get into a lot of reasons why here, but they could build, I think, the offer that makes the most sense for Miami, right? So if you're the Heat and you're forced to trade Jimmy Butler, right? Because you think that he's going to opt out and you're not going to re-sign him, whatever the reason is. I think you're looking for a couple of things. You're looking for that lottery ticket, you're looking for draft compensation, and you're looking for salary cap relief. You need those things if you're going to move off of Jimmy Butler. This deal kind of gets you there. So I've got two separate trade frameworks involving Houston. This is the first one and maybe the most straightforward one. Dillon Brooks, Steven Adams expiring contract, Jabari Smith Jr., and Cam Whitmore. So if you're Miami, you're going to be asking for one of these young guys back. The Rockets can have a ton of them. They can't trade Jalen Green because they just signed him to an extension. He's not eligible to get traded until after this season. They're not going to trade Alperen Sengun. He's a cornerstone of the whole thing. And the other one would be Amen Thompson, who I think Miami would ask for, and then they would be told no because he's also viewed very highly in Houston. So Jabari Smith Jr., the rookie Reed Shepherd, maybe one of those guys is more gettable. I just went ahead and just slotted Jabari Smith Jr. in here. His contract is sort of in between all those guys, so it just makes the money work. And plus, I think he actually makes a lot of sense for Miami. You could put him 6'11", floor spacing guy, defensively very strong, could play both the 4 and the 5. Makes a lot of sense next to Bam. And then you got Dillon Brooks to basically replace Jimmy Butler at that position. Steven Adams provides some depth at center behind Bam. And then Cam Whitmore, out of the rotation basically for Houston this year. He's actually even spent some time in the G League, but he looked good as a rookie. I'm actually surprised he hasn't gotten more playing time. He's worth a flyer to me at 20 years old if I'm Miami. This deal checks a lot of these boxes, David.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at it from Miami's side, it's a difficult place for them to be in given what Jimmy's meant to this organization and everything that he's produced, but you're getting as much as you're possibly going to get for Jimmy Butler. I think this is the best deal that we could possibly find around the league. I just don't know why the Rockets do it. I mean, as much as they might be looking for veteran leadership, this is cutting a big chunk there. They signed Dillon Brooks, they added Jock Lawndale, they've done some moves to kind of shore up their veteran presence a little bit. And Jimmy certainly goes a long way towards carrying a team that has a lot of talent and being able to push them a little bit further into the playoffs, which is where they expect to be. I just don't know that's probably does not feel like the right amount of players to give up for Jimmy Butler. So I think they would probably try and find something else, maybe substitute Landale for somebody else. I'm not sure what they would do, but that seems like they're giving up more than they'd like to.
So here's the other idea here. Could you just do Fred VanVleet and that contract? He's got a team option in that final year. Right. You've got Jabari Smith coming back. You could also just do Fred VanVleet and honestly Cam Whitmore, and you don't even have to get anything else involved. And for Miami, you save a couple $1 million. You get a good player in Fred VanVleet who makes some sense starting next to Tyler Hero in that backcourt. And then Whitmore, who again is that sort of that flyer. The Rockets have a bunch of draft picks coming in, so that would be the sweetener as opposed to some of the young players. Like they could throw in their 2025 first. They could throw in maybe that. I think this 2027 unprotected first from Phoenix is going to be the belle of the ball in terms of the most valuable picks that are out there on the trade market. Who knows if Houston would be willing to part with that? That's a really valuable piece there. But maybe something like that gets it done where, okay, we got a couple of picks coming in. We got a flyer on Whitmore. We got a helpful player in Fred VanVleet. We're going to move off of Jimmy Butler. You're right about the Houston Rockets. I don't know. We already have Raphael Stone, the GM there, saying that they're not going to make a major trade. I tend to believe him considering that the Rockets are really good, but yeah, they're also just not going to do their due diligence and make phone calls. I have a hard time believing that too. I don't know. The other way you could do this too is you take Whitmore out, maybe you put Jabari Smith in, so you get a little bit of a better player there, and then you can add up some salary there. You have Josh Richardson going back, whatever it might be, to start making the money work. You probably have to send another like Alec Burks type of deal, who I don't think the Heat would necessarily miss all that much if you had to do that. So you can build that, and now that works, and you're getting Van
Burks,
Vliet,
Richardson,
Smith.
And Butler for that's Jabari Smith and Fred VanVleet. Yeah, that still seems like something that Rockets probably wouldn't be open to. Like VanVleet's useful, right? He's useful to them and their playoff run. I know they'll probably not look to pay him this summer when he has that team option, but I don't know. The more I come down to it, it's so impossible to gauge where Jimmy Butler is at this stage in his career and how he's viewed around the league. And I just don't know that even for a young team that does want a proven veteran like Jimmy that can kind of get him over that playoff hump, I just don't see how a deal gets shaken out. I really don't. Like, as much as
Why would Houston
there are
rush it? Right? Like they're third in the Western Conference. They made a little bit of a run
They're
in
good
this
enough
NBA
without
Cup. They're very good. And by the way, they still have all this stuff that we're talking about. They can move for a player. I think if they were going to make a trade, Houston, it would be for a
more
player.
complimentary.
I think they still need a star player. If I have one thing with the Rockets, I don't think Alperen Şengün is your number one scoring option on a championship team. I don't know that Amen Thompson ever really gets there, considering what that mountain that he has to climb on that end of the court is going to be. Jalen Green, I know how you feel about Jalen Green. I think a lot of people have actually agreed more with you over the last couple of years than even the first time you said it. But I don't know that Jimmy Butler is that number one option either, because that's what the Heat have been clamoring for, and maybe that's all they need is like that number one option in the playoff setting, and Jimmy can be that. We've seen that. That was also a couple of years ago. And if you're Houston, that's a big risk. It's like, okay, this is the guy that we're going to push the chips in for, and maybe that's not all their chips, but it's a lot of their chips. So I don't know, I think they would look out for a number one scoring option, but not one who's 35 years old. Somebody that's a little bit more in line with their timeline, so they have a little bit more of a build with it. So, all right. Yeah. Those are the destinations. I got just a couple more trades I want to throw your way. This is the Denver deal. So we got the Heat, the Denver Nuggets, and our friends, the Detroit Pistons, back in the mix here.
Cap space
Pistons. The cap space Pistons. They are going to be also the belle of the ball here. This is the deal. Denver has some tough financials, just like Miami does. But this would work and this is a Bobby Marks idea, so I know it works for sure. Michael Porter Jr. and Zeke Naji to Miami. Jimmy Butler goes to the Nuggets, and then the Pistons and the Nuggets swap some role players to make the math work. But you're trading away Jimmy Butler for Michael Porter Jr. You could probably get one pick from Denver, maybe a 2031 first or something like kind of out there, because that's what, maybe a pick swap then a little bit sooner, sure. Denver doesn't have much to work with here. They have no second round picks, I'm pretty sure. But I don't know. Quickly, just give me like 10 to 20 seconds on why you hate this trade. Or maybe you like it. I don't know.
No, I don't know. Michael Porter Jr., again, he's more of a complimentary player. The assumption then would be that Miami feels like they already have their superstar on the roster. And I don't know that they do. As much as they love Bam and view him as a centerpiece, is he that guy who can be your number one option moving forward? Or are you confident enough in Porter Jr.'s offense where it's going to be kind of very complimentary and able to carry that load so that Bam can continue to do everything he does? Is Michael Porter Jr. a 23 points per game scorer to complement what Tyler Hero does alongside what Bam Adebayo provides? I don't know. I don't see that as a likelihood. So I just don't. I don't think it's something that Miami would view as likely.
And then he's hard to trade, Michael Porter Jr. Right? There's the back concerns, the 3 back surgeries. I know he played 81 games last year. He's been really durable this year. Sure. That's still on the medicals. That's still something that if you're a GM trading for Michael Porter, you got to worry about that. I think he's a great fit next to Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. You're talking about floor spacing, size, like all these things that we talk about, and you need to surround guys like Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo with. Michael Porter Jr. checks those boxes. It's interesting. It is interesting nonetheless. It still feels like it's not quite enough for the Heat to say, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and part with Jimmy Butler. But unless they feel like for sure Jimmy Butler's leaving, and then it's like, okay, maybe we're just maybe this is the best offer on the table. And right now that to me might be the cleanest kind of best player coming back who keeps you competitive and fits with what you're doing here. One more for you here.
More than the Rockets deal?
Oh yeah, sure. The Rockets deal is better. No, I think you and I assuming that Houston's not going to do that, but
sure.
Yeah. So the Grizzlies, they feel like they're a piece away. Jimmy Butler makes a lot of sense in grit and grind culture. And if you're the Heat, you can ask for Desmond Bane, Brandon Clark, and Gigi Jackson.
I think Gigi Jackson is a sticking point here. I think they view him so highly that they wouldn't want to give him up. They'd probably throw in another younger player that is making comparable salary.
I'm surprised that you said that and not Desmond Bane, who everybody always talks about like a core piece in Memphis. But I agree with you for the record. But
yeah, I think
if you're getting Butler, you'd be like, yeah, you know what? Maybe Desmond Bane's not so much the core that we thought he was.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I think it's a nice deal for Miami in some senses. You get Jackson, who could kind of fill in for Jimmy long term. You get Bane. I guess he's a guy who can complement Tyler in that starting backcourt there, and I think they liked him in the draft as well. So I guess it makes a lot of sense. If they could pull it off, I wouldn't be I guess I wouldn't be too upset about this one in terms of what Miami gets in terms of perceived value. I just don't think Memphis is the likely to pull the trigger in this scenario.
I have no idea what to think of Memphis. They've tended to be more patient with these things. I think this would be a home run for the Grizzlies. Like, to me, this would be a no-brainer. Desmond Bane he's had a little bit of a down year, especially shooting wise. I think he's an ideal kind of player to put next to Tyler Hero. He's more of like that 3-and-D type of wing, could do some ball handling. Brandon Clark is playing center for them this year, as slight as he is, but like he is a fit.
We know he'd do it in Miami too.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And he's a fit next to Bam. Like, that does make some intuitive sense to me. And then, yeah, if you can get a guy like Gigi Jackson back, again, a flyer there, I don't know. I don't hate it, but this is, a lot of ifs, ands, or buts here when we're talking about a Jimmy Butler trade. It's really hard. The Grizzlies are not on that list of preferred destinations. So that's the other thing. If you're Memphis, you guys say, do we think that Jimmy Butler is going to re-sign here? Right? And maybe that's a situation where you bring them in, they win a bunch of games, they make a deep playoff run in the West, and they say, hey, we got the max money for you here. And maybe Jimmy Butler says, okay, cool. It's a quick private jet flight away from New York. I don't know. Like, who knows?
They drink coffee on Beale Street, don't they? I mean, I'm sure there's a coffee shop around there to watch. Yeah.
One of the most expensive cups of coffee I've ever had, by the way, in Memphis. Of all places. I've been to, you think maybe New York, LA, Miami, San Francisco. Nope. Memphis. Big Face Coffee would be it would slide in real easily there.
Fit right in, yeah.
All right. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.